an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sunshine by Robin McKinley. Brought to you by Rosalie Oceana Kolb. In these chapters, I don't know what to think is going on here. This is a bizarre story, guys, and I really like it. But, dude, welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha, and this is the, I think, fourth part that I've done so far covering Sunshine by Robin McKinley. This was a really unexpected section of the story. So last episode, I believe it was you, Rosie, right, who asked whether or not I thought that Constantine would return, that they would meet each other again. And I thought, of course, I assume that they will meet each other again. I wasn't really sure the circumstances of that, of course, but this was still not what I was expecting. Like, I had a vague idea that they would either run into each other or both, like, either wind up captured again or tracking down somebody, or I don't know what I thought. But I sure didn't expect Constantine to go full on Edward Cullen and just sneak into her room and watch her sleep, which is what winds up happening. I don't know if Robin McKinley is making a direct reference to Twilight by having him do this and just making it not sexy and much creepier. But if that was intentional, I think it's kind of brilliant. Because Constantine could not be less Edwardy. And the whole way that this goes down and what winds up happening between the two of them is really uncomfortable, but also obviously very sexual, and yet revolting and like not sexual at all. One of those things. So we start off with Ray just she is still not sure what's going on. She's just exhausted, and she thinks, obviously, as I, the reader, did, that she's just exhausted because she has gone through this huge trauma. She does say, though, as I sat up and stretched, I didn't feel too bad, and I had the oddest sensation, as if someone had been in my bedroom with me. I really figured that this was Constantine, so I was proven right fairly quickly. She leaves the house, and it's, 4 a.m. to go make cinnamon rolls, and SOF is already waiting for her, and she's like, yeah, we're not going to the lake right now. You know that, right? And she goes in and tries to do what she does, which is bury herself in her work. I wanted to point out another bit of slang that we see. I'd mentioned before the word sheer, which is again used here by the SOF agent, and Thor, but collie is used as basically an analogous to fucked or destroyed. One of the most dependable ways to make a ward collie on you is to expect it to travel, which I really enjoy that, because Kali is, just one of those goddesses that does not get her credit. She is hugely terrifying and badass, and I like that she's being used as a slang for something like this. It's pretty great. So we get some more, information here about charms and how they work, and specifically that charms that are meant to protect you while you travel are super, super difficult, and that actually just the act of moving at about 10 miles an hour can protect you, and that everybody knows this, but nobody has ever really understood the reason why. And she thinks to herself about talking to Constantine and how he says it's not the distance that is crucial, but the uniformity, in terms of them being found easily in the forest. So she's realizing that's probably part of what it is that traveling helps people stay protected because it's not as easy to zero in on them when their surroundings are constantly changing. So I thought that was kind of cool that like she's got an awareness of why that works that other people don't, because she has a strange rational connection with one of the creatures that can take advantage of people who aren't protected. And we also hear about like the wards around her place and the fact that she can very clearly feel them and knows if there's like a hole in them, and wards do require some upkeep. So she has to tend to them and make sure that everything is kind of battened down. And, she says that there are charms that you can wear against your body, but she says that she's never been able to bear them because, quote, they make me a total space cadet. I'd agree to the keyring loop to make Mom feel good, and that was pushing it. Poor thing. It had probably been grateful to be drowned in the shower last night if it had survived the little incident shortly before. So I keep being sort of taken off guard by the description of charms as being alive and sentient in a way. Alive isn't exactly the word. I think sentient is. But imbued with some sort of awareness, you know? And I know, like, this has been mentioned many times before, but I still don't quite, like, keep it in mind. So every time it's mentioned again, I'm just like, oh, right, weird. So she goes into the bakery, like I said, and there's another charm waiting for her from her mother. A particularly lurid new charm was waiting for me on my apron hook that morning. I left it there, glowering to itself. I love that. It's like irritated with her for not taking it, I think. Nobody tried to follow me when I left the coffee house at 10, or at least nobody but some of the overweight so-called wildlife that hangs around the pedestrian precinct and tries to cadge handouts from the weak-willed. I love this, that she like talks about how these animals know what the bakery bags look like. I don't know if you guys have lived in areas like this where the animals are so spoiled and they do kind of know exactly what certain things look like. But when I grew up in Connecticut, there was this one area where people would go and feed ducks, and like the ducks got so they knew what bread bags looked like, and they would just straight up attack you. Like they wouldn't wait for you to come to the water and wait for you to peacefully throw bread in the way that many people, and by the way, don't feed ducks bread. It's super, super, super bad for them. But you know, whenever there's that image in your head of going to feed the ducks, it's a very like tranquil, oh, isn't this sweet? And the ducks are behaving themselves and I'm just sort of relaxing. And in these cases, like the ducks would rip the bag out of your hands and tear it open with their beaks and just basically insert their entire body into that fucking bag. Like, and you were lucky to escape with your life. So yeah, this was very amusing to me. So they go to the cabin, and we had been told in the first few chapters about the bad spots in the woods around the lake, but we're never told what that means exactly. Just that there are some spots that are bad, and then there are some spots that are real bad that everybody does not go near. And so this is the first time that we really encounter one, which I found compelling because, and this is a question that I'm not sure if I'm being nitpicky here or if it's going to get answered eventually. But it doesn't seem like she hit any of these spots when she was fleeing with Constantine. And that could be for several reasons. One, she was working really hard on her magic and just didn't notice, or her magic offered some sort of protection from them. Constantine can feel them also and manages to avoid them. That's certainly possible. And being on foot, it might be easier for him to do that than they are in a car when they have to, stay on roads. But yeah, that really wasn't mentioned on the return trip, only in heading out. she starts to like freak out a little bit as she gets back to the cabin. Like just the smell of things, the feel of it. It's just reminding her of how completely taken by surprise she was. She just didn't hear them coming. And when she says it, there was a bad spot almost at once. I picked it up first, or anyway, I was the one who said, "Hey, I don't know about you, but I don't want to go any farther this way." "Roll up your windows," said Jesse. He hit a couple buttons on the very peculiar dashboard I was only now noticing, and suddenly there was something like heavy body armor enclosing me, oppressive as chainmail and breastplate and a full-face helm, plume and ladies' silk favor optional. I could almost smell the metal polish. "Ugh," I said. "Don't knock it, it works," said Jesse. Our voices echoed peculiarly. We drove very slowly for about a minute, and then a red light on the dashboard blinked, and there was a manic chirping like a parakeet on speed. "Right, we're clear." What? What? That is banana pants. I just can't get over that. I mean, you know what this is reminding me of? This is reminding me of a better done version of some of the technology and magic like dovetailing that was in the Atrocity Archives, which I covered for the book club like a couple months ago. The Atrocity Archives had some really neat ideas about making magic with computers and with, you know, code and whatnot, and combining magic like elements like skulls and blood and whatever with high-tech equipment in order to make spells happen. And you didn't have to have magical ability to do it. Anybody who could work with tech could cast spells. And this is really reminding me of that. There's like, they have used tech to figure out where tough magic is at. And then they managed to avoid it and protect against it as if it were like bullets, you know, gunfire somehow. So we drove through 2 more bad spots like that, and I hated the body armor program worse each time. It made me feel trapped. It made me feel as if when I woke up again, I'd be sitting at the edge of a bonfire with a lot of vampires on the other side. It was a long drive, 30 miles or so. I remembered. Then we reached a really bad spot. Jesse hit his buttons again, but this time it really was like being trapped, held down while things slid through the intangible gaps between the incorporeal links, reached out long taloned fingers and grabbed me. And this next bit is in italics, and it's meant to be like her vision. Big, huge space. Indoors. Ceiling up there somewhere. Old factory. Scaffolding where the workers had once tended the machines. No windows. Enormous square ventilator shafts, vast parasitic humps of silent machinery, contortions of piping like the worm, oh, I always hate this word, Ouroboros in its death throes. And eyes staring, their gaze like flung acid, no color. What color is evil? When I came to, I was screaming. Yeah, so this really like kind of fucked me up. The idea that these bad spots, it's not just feeling shitty. It's not just this like overwhelming, like maybe you get nauseous or clammy or something. The idea that something can get into your head, that's really alarming. And I don't know what it is that she saw. If it's a memory that is left in that spot by somebody who was hurt. If it's a vision of the future, if it's a vision of something happening somewhere else, I've got no clue what this means, but I disliked it. So Jesse had slammed the car into reverse because apparently if it's a bad enough spot, that armor apparently doesn't quite do the job, which is interesting. They've managed to like protect themselves pretty well, but it's not impenetrable, which again, I don't really like. I want impenetrable, please. Let's have this have 0 mistakes. And this is the moment she says, my jackknife seemed to be trying to burn a hole through its cotton pocket to my leg. And this is before we find out that this thing is full of light. And I'm very angry at her for tricking me here. Because she's saying this, I wrapped my hand around it. The heat was presumably illusory, which perhaps explained why the sense of being fried felt so comforting. No, girl, that shit isn't illusory. You filled it with light somehow, and now it's this little talisman that's keeping you, like, from losing your shit, I think. It's like a pocket full of sunshine. And they wind up finding the house pretty quickly. She thinks that she's going to just take a nice stroll along the lake and try and enjoy herself while she can, being in the sun, being on the shoreline, which she doesn't really do very often. But they come across the house fairly quickly, and she has to lead them inside. I love this moment where she says that she's not sure if she can do this, and Pat tells her, we're with you. It's daylight. And then, hey, Jesse, how's your nephew doing with that puppy he talked your folks into buying him? It was well done. Puppy stories got me to the stairs. By that time, Pat had me by the elbow because I was gasping like a puffer demon, except they always breathe like that. But having a hand on my elbow was too much like having been frog marched up the stairs the last time I'd been here. No, I said, thanks, but let me go. Last time, I had help. I like that moment too. That's something that I don't really think of in terms of trauma, of like little being handled, touched, or being in a certain position, like the same position that you had been in when you were being hurt, coming back to you later. Like, there are obvious situations where it's, being something that's really extreme, but this is just somebody being at her elbow, like holding her arm, and that's too much, which makes a lot of sense to me. I think that I would react that same way. So she goes through the front door, and she's really relieved because the shackles are gone. There's just holes where they used to be. And these two SOF guys are, noticing that there are two spots that the shackles had been. And we kind of come to a head here with the two of them. She points to where she was, and Jesse says, and this, kneeling in front of the other holes, I don't remember, I said automatically. There was a silence. Can we have an agreement, maybe, said Pat, that you stop saying I don't remember and do us the kindness of telling the truth, which is that you're not going to say what you remember? There was a longer silence. Pat was looking at me. I met his eyes. He had held his breath till he turned blue last night. He'd already made up his mind to trust me, even knowing that I was lying about what had happened. That made me feel pretty bad, until it occurred to me that there was another angle on last night's demonstration. Not only that Pat and Jesse and Theo were willing to trust me, but that they understood sometimes you had to lie. I really like this moment, because I kind of thought that she had figured this out already. That they were like, listen, we get it. Sometimes you have to say and do shit. But this is when it's really like kind of clicking home for her, and she doesn't tell them. It doesn't completely change her mind. She doesn't suddenly go, oh, you know what? I can trust these guys. I'm going to explain everything. But it sort of changes her perspective on them just a little bit. And I feel like that's edging in the right direction, because I want her to tell them. In a way. I guess it's not really that I want her to tell them, because she's so positive that they're going to react a certain way. And I tend to believe how, like, I tend to trust her instinct on how they'd react if she told them that she saved a vampire. She's probably not wrong about that. But I do want her to tell them, just because I'm dead curious how they'd react. I think she's probably right, but I'm wondering if there isn't any of them that had an encounter with somebody, because when we see Constantine later, he talks about how there are two ways of being a vampire. And so they must have encountered the other kind at some point, right? Somebody must know. And that's like, having them on your side would be a huge ally, I feel like, if you were able to say, we're not totally as, like, we're not without, what's the word I'm looking for? Without quarter going to, like, take down all vampires. But we really just want to take down the ones that enjoy torturing and murdering a lot, which apparently Constantine is not one of that brand. I'm just not even sure that they know that there are two kinds in SOF, you know? So finally, she just says, I'm not going to tell you. Jesse says, okay, I think these are from another shackle. If it had been empty while you were here, you wouldn't mind telling us that. So there must have been another prisoner, and it's this other prisoner you aren't going to tell us about. I didn't say anything. Interesting, said Jesse. So they talk a little bit more about the fact that that those were probably put in special, the shackles and everything. Like, they're not standard in a ballroom. And earlier when they were at the lake house, she notices that Pat is telling them, like, oh, it's been a while since anybody's been down here. And I believe what she's realizing there is that they can sense what happened in a certain place by just standing there. Maybe specifically Pat can, because he has demon blood. And she's really relieved that they never came to her place, because she feels like they would be able to absolutely tell that there had been a vampire there and everything that had gone on. And it's kind of unnerving to her to realize how close she was potentially to being completely found out and not being prepared for it at all. Not even necessarily knowing that that ability was possible. So yeah, then, there's, last night, what happened, said Jesse. And she talks about stabbing this vampire and says that she doesn't really understand what happened, that she just went for it and it worked, and that she's not really clear on how it could possibly have worked. Like, it just all happened so fast. She wasn't thinking clearly about it. And I'm wondering now that I'm, like, you know, sort of, theorizing on things and seeing a little bit more about what she was able to do in terms of her pocket knife being full of light. I'm wondering if there wasn't a brief moment of making the kitchen knife that she used have sunlight in it, and that managed to, like, superpower what was an ordinary knife into basically like a sunlight spear directly to the heart, which is badass as fuck. And I hope that's right. I hope that's what it is. But we'll see. It might be something even cooler than that. I don't know. So she, you know, explains that she knew that he was a vampire because of hearing the giggle and recognizing it from when she was taken. Like, she actually tells them about how he was one of them, but she doesn't tell them he was the one that cut her. Which I wish that she would. I don't, like, I know how private she is, like, and I get that, but I do wish, if anybody's going to understand what's going on with this cut, it would be SOF. Like, and later it turns out okay, and she winds up, but at this moment, she doesn't know that there's a solution that Constantine has. And I feel like people who deal with the supernatural all the time are going to be able to tell this was poisoned and maybe have a way of, like, you know, this can't be the first time, right, that somebody has used a poison blade on somebody, although they never escape. That doesn't happen. So maybe they wouldn't know. I don't know. I'm always for communicating. I always am, like, encourage that. It's not unless I really have reason to not trust a character that I act like, why are you telling them this? Keep your mouth shut. So, yeah. Do you know anything about the master? Said Jesse. I could have said, I'm not going to tell you. I said, no. So this is when they kind of come clean. We have a problem, you see, Sunshine, said Pat at last. Okay, we know you're not telling us everything, but, well, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but that happens oftener than you might think, people not telling SOF everything. Hell, SOF not telling SOF everything. I mean, aside from the nomad blood of guys like Jesse and me, we could probably live with that if that was all it was. We wouldn't like it, but we've had a lot of practice not being told everything. And if you get too pissed off at people, then they really don't want to talk to you. But you've done something pretty well unprecedented. Twice. You got away from a bunch of vampires alone and out in the middle of nowhere. It happens occasionally that a sucker gang gets a little carried away, teasing some kid from a human gang that has been jiving in the wrong place, hoping to see vampires. The kid gets a little cut up, but we take him to the hospital and they stitch him up and give him his shots, and he goes home as good as new, if a little more prone to nightmares than he used to be. It doesn't happen that a young woman alone in the wilderness gets away from a sucker gang, so determined to keep her they have her chained to the wall. So far as I know, it hasn't ever happened before. And that's only the first thing. The second thing is that you sauntered up to a sucker last night that in the first place you had no way of knowing was there. In the second place, he stood there while you staked him without any warning or any backup. And in the third place, staked him with a stainless steel table knife. People have staked suckers without backup, but they've never done it by running up to one in full sight, and they sure as suckers hate daylight don't do it with a goddamn table knife. I pulled the research on it that proves it can't be done last night. Stainless steel is a no-hoper, even if you've had the best ward crafters and charm cutters in the business do their number on it first. I told you I don't need much sleep. I spent the rest of last night going through files for anything about sucker escapees and unusual stakings. There isn't much, and nothing at all like you. So, essentially, what they wind up getting down to is the fact that because she's done something that nobody else has managed to do, they really need her in the field. Because, as they put it, we are losing. And we don't talk about that. Nobody knows that we're losing. But in another 100 years, the suckers are going to be running our show. The wars were just a distraction. We think we won. Well, maybe we did, but we skegged our future doing it. It blows, but it's just the way it is. So little grubby guys like me and Jesse feel we need you in the field a hell of a lot more than we need you disappeared into some study program while they try to figure out how you've done what you've done and how they could make a lot of other people do it too, which they wouldn't be able to because it's going to turn out to not work that way. And we guess you don't want to be disappeared either. I shook my head on a suddenly stiff neck. Yeah, so anyway, if you can off suckers with common household utensils, we want you out there doing it. We'll even lie to the goddess of pain about you to keep you to ourselves, and babe, that takes balls. Well, that's fucking alarming. 1, things are so much worse than anybody knows. 2, that it's like, not only has she done something that's practically unheard of, but they are so desperate that, I mean, it does seem like luck from our, like, yes, she has abilities. Clearly she has abilities. But how quickly she moved toward that vampire has not really been addressed. And until it is, I'm not going to think that a repeat performance is possible. Unless that is something that, you know, an ability that she has not yet come across, which is certainly possible, but we just don't know that yet. And also, like, they bring up something that I think I brought up either last episode or the episode before, which is that if she can do these kinds of things, and they don't even know about the fact that she can keep a vampire alive in the sun. If they did, it would be even worse. But they bring up a similar question, which is somebody going to try and, like, take her and force her into doing it and see if they can isolate whatever it is that gives her these abilities and try and extract it and sort of like either mass produce it or distribute that ability to other people or whatever. So they're thinking much the same way that I was thinking, except they actually have like a good alternative to that where she's still able to help. If, in fact, she were able to get past her crippling fear, which I'm not entirely sure they appreciate how terrified she was, frankly. You know, like, we saw it and how she was almost like vomiting when she was first captured and could barely like put up a fight. Like, there was just no point in a lot of struggle in her mind. She felt that, well, they've got me and nobody ever escapes, so I guess I may as well just wait to die and hope that it's quick, and that's that. And she winds up managing to escape once she is in the sun in the ballroom and like manages to get her energy back up again, I feel like, and sort of replenish the stores. But if she's going to be chasing vampires on the daily, I feel like she'll be wandering around at night much more. And then she's going to have to maybe just sleep in full sun? Like just straight up become a night owl and sleep during the day like a cat in a beam of sunlight? I guess that could work. But they don't know about this whole thing, obviously. So then we have her like heading back with them and her just like thinking things over and wondering if this is going to be something that she can bear to do. It doesn't seem like she's really strongly considering it. It's more her absorbing the fact of the matter, which is that everything is on its last gasp. So she goes to the coffee shop and gets through the evening, deal. And this is another moment of talking about charms in this weird way. I could hear some of Mom's charms moving around in the glove compartment. Once a charm has been given someone's name, if that someone doesn't snap it and let it go live, it may pop itself and try to come after you, which is nuts. And I want to know what coming after you even looks like. When I opened the glove compartment to put a new one in now, half a dozen of the old ones tried to climb up my arm. They were probably all totally cracked from driving around in a car, though, which I like to think that there's a bunch of these charms that are just going to build up in her glove compartment and something's going to happen at some point and she's going to open that and they're going to go nuts, but like a bomb, like a charm bomb. But that's just me being like kind of cartoony about it, I think. So she talks about leaving, like hoping that they can make the coffee shop a 24-hour gig. Then I could never leave the coffee house again for the rest of my life. Pat and Jesse would be disappointed, of course, and we'd have to gear hard after the insomniac market to keep the customer flow up all night long, since you can't ward a restaurant. But these were mere practical problems. The thing that really bothered me was that I'd have to tell everyone why. So she is really like not just upset about the whole idea of being asked to do this, not just the whole idea of being, as she puts it, a bad cross, which is the thing we talked about last episode, which is part demon blood, part magic handler blood, which can just interact really, really badly. She is super bummed that she might be the first bad cross that is a wuss in history. Like, that's not what tends to happen. And she's concerned that maybe her wussiness is temporary and something's going to cause her to snap and she's going to kill somebody. And later on when she runs into Constantine, I say that like they were just walking by each other on the street, she's thinking about her knife and what if she turned it into a chainsaw and just went ham on a bunch of people. So, yeah, this whole thing is just like, just super fraught. And I wish that she would talk to her mom about the demon thing. I know it's probably pointless, but again, I'm just very curious to see what her mother's reaction would be to her talking about this, So she is going to sleep and she wakes up a couple hours later and is just aware that Constantine is sitting there. He is like in an armchair that's in the corner of the room, I think. And it kind of alarms her that her wards don't seem to be sending off any warnings. There aren't any holes in them. There's nothing letting her know that he's there except her instincts. And she's figuring that she's probably granted him access in that manner because of inviting him in on the other night. But it's just, not a super comfortable notion to realize that, like, once I invited him in, that was it. And I've sort of surrendered any option of maybe cutting him off later. And I'm not sure of that. Maybe if she concentrated and tried to use her magic handling to banish him, she could do that. But at the moment, it had never occurred to her that she needed to do that because I think she expected her wards to do the job. And of course, there's the fact that she doesn't want him gone. She's actually comforted him by him being there, which is something that I want to see explored a little bit more. This is a really true thing for people who go through some serious life-changing trauma, is that they wind up getting much closer to people who either experienced the same thing with them or experienced something very similar, because they find that there are almost no people in their lives who understand how they're feeling and the way their mind works and how things have changed for them. And the only people who understand are the ones who went through it too. So it's sort of weird because he's not human. So the way he experiences it isn't going to be the same. But he knows exactly the situation that she was in and exactly what happened. And she knows to a degree that she can rely on him because he saved her life. And even when they got to a point where he could have fed on her, he didn't. So that's important. But yeah, I like the fact that there's like this sort of bond between them that is beyond just, well, you saved my life and so now I owe you. It's like having him there is somehow reassuring to her, to the point that when he says he'll be back and he isn't a couple days later, it really worries her and she's concerned something's going on with him. So she says to him, so I guess Bo is looking for me. And he says, yes. And she says, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. I just, I did what I had to do. And he says, Bo is looking for me too. When he finds me, he will be careful to destroy me. Last time was theatrics. This time he will take no chances. And at this point, he comes over because he comes to sit on the bed to talk to her. And she gets up and moves in a certain way that it rips open the cut on her chest again. And at first when he hisses, she thinks that it's him reacting to the blood and about to attack. But I think that what it is the fact that not only is she still bleeding from that wound, but he may be able to smell that there's something not right about it. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here because she asks, why does he hate you so much? And I'm going to read this just so we have the exact line. It's a long story, he said at last. We are nearly the same age. There are different ways of being what we are. Mine is one way, his is another. Mine, it turns out, has certain advantages. If others perhaps thought the implications through, some things might be different. Bo does not wish anyone to think those implications through. Destroying me is a way to erase the evidence. Plus that, he does not care for me to have advantages no longer available to him. So that is really interesting. This is kind of tying in with my thought that could human beings team up with the vampires that maybe don't feed on human blood? Maybe those are the two differences. And if you don't feed on human blood, it allows you some sort of abilities that those who do feed on human blood don't have. And of course, if those who don't feed on human blood disapprove of the ones who do and are interested in throwing their lot in with human beings, then they would be pretty outmatched. The only things that vampires have going for them, because they're smaller in number, they're clearly catching up pretty quickly, but their superior speed and silence and agility and everything. So if we had those on our side, some people that had that same ability or something even more advanced, that would really help even out the playing field a lot more. And I could see that being very worrisome. He has another urgent reason now. If he does not destroy me, he will lose control of his gang. Bo likes ruling. It is also necessary to him that he rule, to do it with those advantages I possess and he does not. And while as the leader of his gang he is much more powerful than I am, alone I am the stronger. So this is all really interesting, and I wish that Constantine would go into more detail. I also wish that Ray would ask more relevant questions. Because the first thing she says is, and you don't run a gang, I said. And I'm like, girl, no, come on. Why are you not asking about what the differences are? But she's a little bit befuddled. She just woke up. It's okay. So he says to her, essentially, I know that neither of us really like this, but I think we're going to have to team up in order to keep each other alive. And I like the fact that he addresses, you won't like it, I won't like it. But he asks her, will you help me? And she's like, I mean, if the alternative is dying, then yeah, I guess I will. And this is when he can see the blood on her. And he reaches forward and touches it and tastes it a little bit. And she thinks that he might lose it and feed on her. But instead, he can tell by tasting it that it's poisoned. And it wasn't for her. The poison was meant for him. That once he lost control and drank her blood from that cut, he would have poisoned himself and died. Which is just such an elaborate, indirect thing. I'm not criticizing the writing. This is just a character. Like, that seems like something they would do because they were, as he put it, being very theatrical from the start. And it turns out that this poison is weakening her. It's been in her system for months at this point. And she had thought it was just being tired because of what she went through. And, you know, having nightmares and trouble sleeping and that sort of thing. But it turns out that it's this poison sapping her strength. So, yeah, I like this little, what do you call it? It's a nice little twist that hadn't even occurred to me. I figured that there was something on the blade, but I didn't really consider that it was going to stay in her system. I thought that whatever it was that was on the blade just kept it open, and that was its sole function, so that they could track her down better. What threw a wrench in that theory was when she actually runs into the goblin giggler and stakes him, and he doesn't react to her being nearby. He doesn't sense her. He doesn't smell the blood from the wound. So clearly, if that had been what it was intended to do, it didn't do a great job. So that was what kind of, shot that all to hell, but I couldn't decide what else it could be for. So poison that is slow acting on her because it wasn't meant for her in the first place makes a lot of sense. And he tells her, I can help you, but it's going to be tough. And I think it'll heal you completely, but you're going to have to trust me on this. And she agrees to do that. So she agrees, goes to work. We have, some talk about all of the stuff that she's doing at work and running into yet more charms that are being hidden around the place because her mother has sort of caught on to the fact that she's not using the charms the way that she's supposed to. And then she goes to this bookshop, it's a rummage sale, really. And she buys 2 books, Sordid Enchantments and Dark Blood. These 2 novels that are about the others and are very sordid and, well, it's called Sordid Enchantment, so I guess you would know it's sordid. And they're sort of like looked down on by a lot of people ever since the Voodoo Wars. And she's really into this stuff. So she picks that out, and then she's like rummaging through a box, and she gets sort of zapped. She says it's like she put her arm in a cappuccino machine, which is a very strange way to say that. It's not like, oh, I touched a power outlet. I put my arm in a cappuccino machine. Like, I don't even know what that means. Cappuccino machines are what? Just filled with boiling water. I don't feel like that's a zap, but okay. And when she takes it out, it's this like big oval plated thing that has some symbols on it. And it's really tarnished and she can't tell what the symbols are. And it's obviously a ward that's still quite live, but nobody else seems to notice it. She goes to buy it, and when she brings it to the counter to buy, she fully expects them to be like, oh no, this one's live. It's not for sale. My mistake. But instead, the person who's checking her out doesn't even seem to notice. And her friend can says that it's really appealing, but doesn't seem to sense that it's a live ward either. So for some reason, this is like connecting with her specifically, but that's not happening for anybody else. So she goes and, finishes her dessert shift and is super exhausted. I really like the description of everything going wrong at the restaurant and like people calling out and just all this stuff that happens that, feels very familiar if you've worked in kitchens before. And this is something that I haven't talked about too much, but I really, really love how much of a fucking food snob she is. I should have talked about this long ago, but it's probably not that interesting to anybody but me. I just there's a moment when she's in SOF in the last chapter where she's being offered coffee and brownies and stuff from this other all night diner. And she's looks at these brownies that they are trying to give her. And she's no, there's way too much raising agent. There's way too much flour and their chocolate is low quality. And I'm like, girl, amen. People talk about how, well, there's no such thing as a bad brownie or whatever. And they'll say that are you high? Of course there is. What are you talking about? There are a lot of bad baked goods out there. And there is nothing worse to me than a cakey brownie. If you make cakey brownies, you don't make brownies. You make cake badly. That's all there is to that. And she talks about how one of the other bakeries uses electric kneading machines and how she has complete contempt for that. And even critiques the bread that she's given when she's shackled to the wall, as if they're going to be giving her gourmet bread. They're buying her soft, pillowy Wonder Bread. Of course, that's what they're giving her. They don't give a shit. But I just really enjoy the fact that she is such a purist and so impossible in terms of being happy with what she makes. There are things that come out great and she's pleased with them, but she goes through a long period of fighting with recipes, which I can relate to. And then she'll find a recipe that she likes and then she has to evaluate whether it's actually worth the time and energy. This chapter, she's dealing a lot with these cherry tarts because, Charlie, in an effort to cheer her up, got her this cherry pitting machine. And while the cherry tarts have come out really well and people are now asking for them, she's not a huge fan of using this contraption in the end. So now she has to decide whether or not she really wants to keep up with this. And I just really enjoy all of her snarkiness and commentary about the food. Obviously the lady writing this knows food, and that's always something that I appreciate. So when she wakes up the next day, there's a moment where, every morning she's been kind of feeling like she's not sure if she's going to be able to get up. And yet she's feeling sort of pumped, I think, because of having, Constantine come back. And I'm just really curious. So I'm trying to find this spot. Okay. I'd spent some time considering what I should, wear, because she's expecting him to be back that night. This vampire in the bedroom thing was a trifle more intensely disturbing than this vampire around it all thing. Even if the disconcertingness was only happening in my mind, there was a corollary to the story about male suckers being able to keep it up indefinitely, that you had to invite them over that threshold first, too. But if they could seduce you into dying just by looking at you, then they could probably perform other seductions as well. Okay, this particular vampire had declined to seduce me to death when he could have. This was a good omen, as far as it went. I reminded myself that the sound of his laughter made me want to throw up, and that in sunlight he looked, well, dead. Let's get real here. I couldn't possibly be interested in. I involuntarily remembered that sense of vampire in the room. It wasn't like the pheromone haze when your eyes lock with someone else's across a room. It really was not at all like that. But it was more like that than anything else I could think of. It probably had something to do with the peak experience business. With a vampire in the room, you're sitting there expecting to die. Sex and death, right? Peak experiences. And since I didn't go for any of the standard neck-risking pastimes, I didn't have a lot of practical knowledge of the hormone rush you get when you may be about to snuff it. Perhaps someone who lived free-fall parachuting or shark wrestling would find vampires in the room less troubling. So I like this weird thing that she's having where she's like, I can't decide on what is going on with the way that I reacted to him. I don't think it's sexual. I'm not positive that it's not sexual. And so when she goes to bed, she wears clothes to be prepared to like get up in the middle of the night and go do whatever. And she makes sure to wear like the most unappealing clothing that she can find. However, he does not show up and she wakes up in a foul mood and winds up getting in a screaming fight with anybody who comes near her until she finally kind of pushes Charlie because she wants him to tell her that she's being a bitch and kind of wants to like find out whether or not he really wants her there. And in the end, he says he does. And there's a moment where it's like she doesn't really believe him. And I liked this moment between the two of them. Just this whole like her having such self-loathing and not really believing that anybody else could want her around. And he talks about the way that he and her mother discussed her and what they thought might have happened. And that Sadie is her mother, thought that maybe there was a demon or something. So in the end, of course, he asks, what do you want to do? And she says, go on making cinnamon rolls. I said instantly. Charlie smiled faintly. That's what I want to hear, of course. Is it? I said. Do you want someone so obviously, not just some kind of freak magic handler, but someone who, I mean, with vampires, do you want someone like this? Like me? Making your cinnamon rolls? Yes, said Charlie. Yes, you make the best cinnamon rolls probably in the history of the world. Never mind all the rest of it. We pay taxes for SOF to take care of the others. We need you here. If you want to be here, I don't care who your dad is or what else you can do with a table knife. So she's like, well, okay, that's good. The next day, Constantine still doesn't come. And now she's really starting to get worried. She has sort of started to chill out on being as angry and biting everyone's heads off as she had. And she polishes the glyph that she bought at the rummage sale. But even once she has it cleaned up, she can't read the symbols on it. So she goes into like a cleaning tizzy and cleans her house from top to bottom until it tires her out enough that she passes out. And this time when she wakes up, he's there. So here comes this weird ass scene. He needs her to, first of all, show him the knife. And this is when we get our big surprise as readers because she hasn't mentioned this. She opens the drawer that it's in. The light was visible at once in the darkness. I picked the knife up and cradled it in my hand, a tiny Clement Sun that happened to look like a pocket knife. In ordinary daylight or good strong electric light, it still looked like a pocket knife. I held it out toward him. This has been since that night? Yes, it happened. Do you remember right at the end I transmuted it again into the key for my door? Yes. I'm pretty sure that's when it happened. It had been something in the dark colored when I pulled it out. It was something to do with making the change at night, I think. I think I'm not supposed to be able to do stuff after dark, but I did do it. I felt something snap in me. And since then it's been like this. I shifted it back to a knife the next day. Didn't notice till the evening what had happened. I thought it would fade after a while, but it hasn't. And she thinks about how doing stuff after dark seems like that should be her limit. And yet she did, but she'd been sitting in the lap of a vampire when she did it. So maybe she had somehow taken on his like night connection when she managed to do this, which is a really interesting idea. So Constantine at this point says that he feels like a little bit of an arrogant fool because maybe if he had talked to her before just running out into the world to try and solve her problem, he could have found out about this thing a little sooner and maybe it would have helped solve the problem. To which she's like, oh, really? You're not thinking clearly about everything? Well, I guess I should send you to prison. Like, who is, guy? So finally, he tells her what he needs her to do, that he wants her to cut him on the chest in the same spot that her cut is. and she can't really do it. She opens the knife and it's glowing, and he's saying, okay, it's really going to hurt. Like, that's going to burn me. So you're going to need to do this cut real quick if you can, because I really would rather not be in so much pain. And I also don't want to touch the knife. So you really need to do it for me. And finally, he has to like grab her hand that is holding the knife in it and cut himself using her hand because she just can't make herself. And when it cuts him, he like cuts it way deeper than her cut was. Meanwhile, her cut has opened up again pretty badly, and she can feel it like dripping out onto her nightshirt. So then the slash he made was deeper and the blood raged out. I was whimpering or moaning. Oh no, oh no. I dropped the knife and reached toward him as if I could close the awful gash with my hands. The blood was black in the moonlight. There was so much of it, too much of it. It was hot, running over my hands. Good, he said. He took my bloody hands and turned them back towards me, wiped them down the front of my poor, once white nightgown firmly against the contours of my body, pulled my hands toward him again, smeared them across his chest, and then back to press them against me. He repeated this till my nightgown stuck to me, sopping, saturated, as if I had been swimming, except the wetness was his blood. I was weeping. Hush, he said. Hush. I don't understand, I said, weeping. I don't understand. This cannot be healing. It can, he said. It is. All is well. Lie back. Lie down. You will soon sleep. I lay down, bumping my head against the headboard. My tears ran down my temples and into my hair. The smell of blood was thick and heavy and nauseating. I saw him looming over me, felt him lie down upon me gently, so gently, till our bleeding skins met with one thin, sodden layer of cotton partially between, till the new wound in him pressed down against the old wound in me. His hair brushed my face as he bowed his head. His breath stirred my hair. "Constantine," I cried, "are you turning me?" "No," he said, "I would not, and this is not that." "Then what? Do not talk. Not now. Later. We can talk later." Dude, maybe just tell her what's going on. Guy, this is crazy pants, and you should tell her. He bent his head to me again, and when he stopped my mouth with his blood ran across my tongue and down my throat. So he kisses her, essentially. It's not like that. It's not a passionate moment. It's a very sort of like matter-of-fact moment, but that is what it is. He kisses her and has cut his lips before he did it so that his blood is in her mouth. So that's horrifying. This whole thing is so horrifying. So she wakes up and she looks down and her dress is white, even though it's sort of tacky still. And she figures this was all a horrible nightmare, except that her knife is sitting out. And she looks over, and he's sitting there still. And she's sort of like, wait, how is he sitting in my house in the middle of the day? What's going on? And we realize a few moments later that whatever he did, now she can see in the dark, which is pretty rad. And there's a really interesting thing where she thinks about what he did and how it all went, and the dream that she had. And she calls it the blood dream. And she basically sees and feels and senses everything that a deer that he fed on felt as she was living, and then her death. But her death isn't this horrible thing. He doesn't like mess with this deer. And that he like hunted the deer for her on her behalf to get, as he puts it, clean blood. So that was the blood that he used to heal her, which I don't understand how this works. And I really wish he would explain it better. But apparently communication is not Constantine's forte. So he says, I told you last time that Bo and I chose different ways of being what we are. You magic handlers know you risk with every sending the recoil. Bo is burdened by many years of the recoil of the torment that provides the savor to his meals. The savor is real. Yes, I too have tasted it, but it is not worth the price. So that's interesting, that the idea of, as it's almost like a karmic thing, you know, inflicting this torment on people when you kill them to feed, it adds something to your food, and yet you wind up having to suffer some sort of consequence for doing that later. And then she asks, why are you not, you said you would not turn me. Why are you not telling me not to look into your eyes? And he says that his theory is that she can't be turned. He's like, I think you can be killed, obviously, the same way a person could. But I don't think that you can be turned. I don't think that would work on you because of the sunshine that's like in you somehow, which is pretty cool. I like that that's like not a danger for her, and that's not on the table. She's not going to turn into a vampire to try and, you know, she is like the opposite. It's just the whole thing is just a really interesting, take on this whole concept of being a vampire hunter. And I'm saying that as if that's what she is, when in fact she has not decided to do that. And I'm not sure that she will. I don't know what she's going to say to these SOF guys. I do not know what I have given you tonight. Another silence. He added, I do not know what you have given me. Another longer silence. Well, I said shakily, I think I can see in the dark. And that is the end of part 2. So yeah, that was just a lot. There's a lot happening, and there's so much that I don't really understand or know about. And like the fact that this background of this story is so rich, and it's the only book of this story, and it's not part of a series, is really something. Is there anything that you guys want to ask me before I wrap this one up? Because I'm pretty much at the end of my hour here. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the story. Thank you very much to Rosalie Oceana Kolb for commissioning this one. And I'm just dying to know what the hell, pretty much, you know. I have no idea what can be coming down the line. So, yeah, she hasn't ruled out writing another book, I don't think, but it's been so long. Oh, well, that's kind of interesting. It'd be kind of, I wonder how it would change if she wrote it today after all this time. Well, all right, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I have a few people, Abby and Rachel, as well as Rosalie in the audience. Thank you guys for coming and chatting and contributing. And thank you all for listening. If you're interested in commissioning something, you can go to unspoiledpodcast.com/shop, and you can join the group at facebook.com/groups/spoilmepod. Thank you all again so much. Thank you, Rosalie. And I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.